Welcome to another episode of Antimatter Skunkworks Edition. This one is another in a series of Halloween episodes that I'm doing. First, I'd like to apologize to all the moms out there with mad coding skills. I named the episode this way because I wanted people to be welcomed and realize that this is not a difficult project, even though it involves one of these. This is an Arduino. Don't run away. Don't be afraid. I promise you, this is extremely simple. I am the world's second worst coder, and I didn't have to do any coding to get this to work. In fact, this is the second project that I've worked on where I have yet to write a single piece of code to make this operate. Both of them work flawlessly by just cutting and pasting it in. Somebody has already done that work for us. This is the Arduino Uno. I'm not going to explain it because that's been done all over the internet. Suffice it to say, this is what you need to buy. And it's about $30, I want to say. I've actually had this one for a while, so I haven't checked the prices recently. The reason you want the Uno, because there are a number of different Arduinos out there, is because the code is going to reference some of these pins that you're going to plug into. And if you use that code on a different board, those pins may not be the ones it's addressing. Also, the chip, this is the microcontroller, and that's what this whole board is about. It basically makes this microchip work. If it's a different microchip, then the code may not work there either. So get yourself an Uno. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them on, I prefer to buy them on Adafruit. I'll put a link in the description somewhere. And I think it's about $30, and you're going to need to power it with a 5-volt power supply, but I think you can probably do that with stuff you have laying around the house. I'll show you that as well. When it comes to doing this project, there are many ways to slice this pie, and one of the ways is to use this screw terminal in order to attach things, and I think this is a really good way to go. They're relatively cheap, bought on eBay, and they come in different lengths with different numbers of terminals, of course, but I just think this is a really simple way to get things done, and it doesn't require to solder, so I highly recommend one of these. Next up, I would order some of these. They're very cheap. On eBay, I saw them for less than $3, and you get a whole bag of these little guys, but you're going to need them because this little pin here is small enough to get into the holes on the Arduino, and it's going to be hard to find a wire that will, so get yourself some of these as well. You are, of course, going to need some LEDs. I get them on eBay. These are a good thing to get on eBay, but you can get them on Amazon or Adafruit or any of the other places online that you like to shop. But on eBay, if you get them, they will come from China, and they all pretty much come from China, but you want to make sure they don't ship from China, otherwise it's going to take 2-3 months to get there, and you don't want to wait for that, right? So you also need to make sure that they have these leads on them. If they're not leaded, then you get surface mount LEDs. You're going to need specialized equipment for that, like a fine tip soldering iron, a PC board to put them on that's been etched, a couple mules, a hooker, and a fire truck. So don't do that. Also, wherever you get them, you can see I've written on this bag here, make sure you get that information, because as you can see, it didn't come on the bag. It just basically says, hey, look, red LEDs. Like, that helps. Fortunately, if you don't have this information, almost all red LEDs will have the same values, same thing with blues and greens and so forth, and you can just use those in the calculator, and it really doesn't matter. I mean, if you blow one up, they're like, at most 10 cents, I think. But it's good to have that because you're going to go on the internet and you're going to type in LED calculator. And because we're hooking them in series, meaning that the plus voltage comes from the pin on the Arduino, goes through a resistor to the plus on one diode, and then the minus goes to the plus on the next diode, and that minus comes back around and goes to the Arduino on the ground. That's how your circuit's going to go. You need to know that resistor value, and to do it, what you do is you type in what your voltage is. In this case, I'm pretty sure it's 5 volts coming from the Arduino. You need to know your forward voltage, which it's 1.9 to 2.1, so type in 2. And your current, 20 milliamps, and it will spit out the result for you. Literally type in the internet, LED calculator, or to be more specific, LED series calculator. And it'll probably ask you how many LEDs, and you're going to say 2 because you got 2 eyes, right? And each circuit is the same, but they don't affect each other, so you just need to do that and then do it 5 times. and it'll spit out a value of something like, I don't know, 380 ohms or something like that. And that means you're going to need resistors. So what you're going to want to do is, at the time you get these, go ahead and get yourself a slew of resistors with different values in them. A lot of them come in quarter watt sizes. I would recommend half watt. So type that into your search engine and get the larger ones, because I find it interesting that I bought a whole bunch of resistors that are supposed to be for LEDs, but they were quarter watt, and a lot of times it recommended I needed a half watt. And if you hook a quarter watt up, you'll notice it gets hot pretty quick. You could still use it, and there's a way to do it to hook them up, but I really don't want to go into that. So point is, you'll need LEDs and you're going to need resistors, and if you don't have the exact resistor, it calls out, and the calculator will give you common values. And then use the next higher one, because what will happen is you'll actually draw less milliamps, so it's actually kind of easier, right? You're using less current. And I found that you can often go almost down to 10 milliamps before you really notice the light output change. That varies per LED, so it may not be, but certainly you can go to 15 and you really won't notice that much of a difference. And even if they were a little dimmer, that just means your creature's eyes are just going to be a little more ominous, I think. So don't worry about that. Just make sure that you get a bunch of a bunch of resistor values that are handy. And they sell them in kits, and they're not expensive either. You can get those on eBay as well. All right, so the problem is I've already done this and I forgot to record it, and now I don't want to undo everything I've done. So I'm going to have to explain it without actually going through it, and I apologize for that. But fortunately, this is really quite simple. When you get your Arduino, there should be a little document there that tells you where to go. I think it's literally arduino.org or something like that, to download this program that runs the Arduino. And it'll look something like this, only it'll be completely blank. And it just has a few commands up here in the corner. And then, so what you do is you plug your Arduino in using the USB printer cable, and that'll provide both the 5 volts power that it needs to run the Arduino, as well as communication between your computer and the Arduino. Then you would simply go to YouTube and find the guy's sort of instructions on his video that he put the code in the description, and I have put a link, and you can see there it all is, and you just copy it, and then you just paste it right into there, and this is it, and it's very short. You can see it's barely even 1 page. That's it. And if you're not a programmer and you don't understand these things, it's actually kind of possible to just sort of figure it out if you just sort of look at the syntax. He's got some comments here, and then it says something like pin mode 2, pin mode 3, and so forth. So what this tells you is that all the outputs are going to be on pins 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that's how you really know where to plug your blinking LEDs in. So just go look on the internet. It'll tell you what pins 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are. Even I don't know. I did the same thing. And you plug them in there. And I plugged mine in order just so I know that if the right one went out for some reason, that it would be the first one to be on pin 2 or something like that. But it's not even necessary, because his randomization sequence means that they're all going to be on, and then they're all going to randomly blink. So it doesn't matter really if the one on pin 2 blinks instead of the one on pin 6, right? So it's all just kind of random. That's the point of this thing. So once you have that in there, you just go to this little command here, this little arrow, and it tells you what it says. It says upload, right? So you click on that, and it feeds back. It's pretty intuitive. It feeds back and says, hey, I'm uploading right now. And then when it's done, it says upload successful or complete or something like that. Then you have to test it and make sure if that's true. And I did that using some separate LEDs with some resistors and just made sure that everything was working fine. You may not know that until you get everything sort of set up, and hopefully you'll test that before you string them into the trees and stuff, right? And if you have a problem, and I think I actually did have a problem, when I went back and looked, I noticed that I had an extra bracket in there right at the beginning or something like that. I don't know how it got there. Maybe it was already in the program when it started up. Maybe it wasn't completely blank. I don't recall. So just look for little things like that and then test it and see if it works. So that's it. So it's really quite simple. So here's the part that I can't tell you how to. I mean, I can. I'm using this conduit, but I think what you should do is use whatever you have laying around the house. It could be some popsicle sticks. It could be, one guy used actually a container and put the LEDs inside, and it kind of reflected off the inside, and he cut 2 holes in it. So it all depends on the look you're going for and what you have available to you. But I just have this. It's pretty easy to work with, so I'm just going to drill a couple holes, stick the LEDs in there, run the wires out the back, and then I can hopefully clamp that onto a tree or a bush somehow. But like I said, a million ways to do it. Use whatever you've got available and what's easy for you. So here's an easy way to get a straight line down a tube. You just put it in any kind of a trough you may have. In this case, a vise, and you just draw the line like that, and it'll go not crooked. So I'm going to put my holes toward the end of the tube just so it's easy to work with. It's down the middle. It's going to be hard to get your fingers in there and wires and stuff like that. So I'm just going to put it way on the outside here. That'll be one hole, and that'll be another. It doesn't really matter. It's just depends on how widely spaced you want your creature's eyes to be. So if you put your LEDs in the way I've done here, and I hope that'll focus, you can see I just stuck it in from behind. I made the hole just right so it kind of plugs in with a bit of friction so it doesn't want to come out. Although I'll probably put a little drop of heat, what do they call that stuff? Hot glue, to hold it in place. But if you do it this way, and you put one on this end and another one on that end, you're going to have 2 little pinpoints of light created by LEDs. What's this? A jug, you say? Ha! You're wrong. This is not a jug. This is potential, my friends. Potential, I say. This is a very scarifying Halloween jug. That's what it is. And what I'm going to use it for, I think, is a diffuser. Those little pinpoint LEDs of light may look really cool when you're directly on them, but if you go a little bit off target, they're hard to see a lot of times. Also, that may not be the look that many of you are going for. You may want something a little bit more glowy, in which case you're going to need a diffuser. And that's where Mr. Jug comes in here. So what you need for diffusing is 2 things. One is a little bit of distance from the light source, and the other is some kind of a semi-transparent material, very much like this. If you don't have something like this, you could always use a clear piece of plastic and then scuff it up with some sandpaper, or, I mean, there's probably a million ways to do this. You might even just shine it through a piece of white paper. Might be enough. But I think this is perfect because it's plastic, so it'll work well outdoors. It's trash, so it doesn't really cost anything. And I think it's already got this sort of texture on it, especially right through here, which will, I think, diffuse the light really well. We're going to find out because I have a feeling I'm going to need something more than just 2 little LEDs. Alright, all you moms, I told you you weren't going to have to buy anything special to do this project, and you don't. Maybe, sort of, kind of. So I'm going to be using a soldering iron, but you don't have to use a soldering iron. What you could do is use a heat gun. If you don't already have a heat gun, they're really cheap, maybe 15-20 bucks at Home Depot or Harbor Freight, and they're useful for a lot of different things. You cannot use a hairdryer, it's not hot enough. And a heat gun, by the way, is really hot. If you don't want to do that, you could get by with a lighter. I don't recommend that method, however. But what you can do in lieu of soldering, I will be soldering, but you don't have to. You can use one of these. And I'll bring it up close. Hopefully the camera will focus on that. This is called, yeah, I don't know what it's called. We call them splicers at work, but basically it's just heat shrink with some solder in the middle, and on the outside there are 2 little bands of like an adhesive. And when you heat this up, the solder will melt and solder the 2 connections. You put them together right under the little solder that you can see, and you heat it up. The solder will melt, solder the 2 together, and the adhesive will melt and seal itself to the 2 wires that you're putting together, or in this case an LED, and that'll actually help seal it against weather as well. So if you don't want to solder, you don't want to buy a soldering gun, then this would be a way you can get around doing that without any specialized equipment. And I think you can use a lighter. I don't know if a lighter is going to actually melt the solder. I know you can use it on regular heat shrink. So you may have to get a heat gun. I would recommend getting one anyway. Or borrow one, even better. eBay's your friend. So I think I said before I'm using this because I have it laying around and I just kind of like to get rid of it. But you can use any kind of scrap you have laying around. Even a stick off a tree would work. Just anything that can space your eyes apart that you can attach to. In this case, I think it may not be the best choice, because if I have a branch going this way and I want to put this on there in the bush or whatever, I could probably use a zip tie and that wouldn't be a problem at all. But if my branch is kind of going that way and this is where I want it in the bush facing the right direction, then it may not be so easy to attach, right? So, but you can do anything really. So just pick whatever you have laying around that you think might work for your bushes. I do recommend something maybe plasticky, something waterproof. Because I don't know about where you live, but in Florida, October is not the rainy season, it's a dry season, which means the minute I put something up, it rains. So let me show you what happens when you diffuse the light. So hopefully that's pointed right at the camera. If I put this here, you can see now that there isn't even a distinguishable two LEDs. They're just one big blob, right? But as you bring it closer, they start to get better and better, and then when you're really close, as you can see, no distance, there really isn't much diffusion at all. You have to back off and find that spot that you want. I think those look like eyes right there. Of course, they're way too close together for my taste. Now if you come here where it's more diffuse, you can get a little bit closer with it, or further away. So you get the idea. You'll have to find what you want, what looks best for you, and frankly, I may not even know myself until I get out there in the dark and look at them and say, well, the one on the right doesn't look good, the one on the left looks great, I'm going to do all of them that way, or something of that nature. Okay, I'm going to try the splicer. This splicer is a little bit big for this job, and I hope I'm not giving you wrong information. There may not be any smaller splicers for this, but I'm going to try and get the resistor to stay inside and leave a little bit extra here so that I can bend this at a 90 degree, which I think I'm going to want to do. Your heat gun probably won't have this funky device on this side. That just reflects some of the energy back. You'd have to just move yours around more, but hopefully I can keep my fingers out of the way of this. Oh, I just realized you can't see it. I'm keeping it there, keeping it there. All my fingers are getting warm. I gotta move it around. There, it melted. Whew! That's hot on my fingers. Let me use a pair of pliers. This is better. Alright, I think that's as far as it's going to go. Alright, so if you look here, you can see that the tube, the heat shrink didn't quite come all the way down to it. It couldn't shrink enough, and same on this end, but it did melt the solder, so it's still a way to solder stuff together, and it's not too bad. So you could, if you can't get a smaller one for what you're doing, you can use these slightly larger ones and still make this work. So if you are going to use something like this, a little important safety tip here, or whatever, a little assembly tip, you should put it on this way, because the screw is going to turn to the right when it gets tight, and that will grab this and want to tighten it around the screw. If you put it on this way, as you tighten, it's going to want to push this off and undo the little hook you have on it. So this is the case for anything like this. Alright, so this is the cheapest box that I could find that had some kind of moisture seal on it up here on seeing the rubber gasket there where it shuts. Of course, I violated that by putting a couple holes, inputs and outputs here. And I'm powering the Arduino with a 5-volt supply that you would just use for like a cell phone, and I'm read online that that's not the greatest way to do it. You should probably use the 9-volt input down here. Because it's got onboard regulators, and the 5 bypasses those, so if anything happens and it goes over voltage, it'll fry your Uno. So I might change that out later, assuming that I'm not too lazy to go buy one or find one hanging around. This is going to be for a different project, so I got this little box so that I can put all the stuff in it and help keep it a little bit watertight. I mean, I can kind of seal these holes, right? It also has a place to lock here and here. If you were to buy this one, it was about 20 bucks. I think it was $22 on Amazon. It's the only one I could get, I said, that was in this price range that was a decent size, and I needed to put more stuff in there than just this, so especially for Christmas. But if you get it, the box is a little bit flimsy, so if you put the lock on here, it can still be basically pried open from there, so you really kind of need two if you're going to do it. And I only bought one lock, of course, so and I was grinding, I got some dirt on it, but it doesn't matter. It's going to be outside all its life, right? You can peel these stickers off. But anyway, that's a decent box, I think, for what I'm doing. And I think I may have failed to mention that I bolted it to the floor so nobody can just run off of the box. Use some of these hurricane screws that go into the concrete, so they'll look like this without anything when, you know, there's no box here. And let me show you, I ran the cables out. Let me show you where they go. I used zip ties to put them in the tree, and it was easy to get them to go where I wanted. I wanted this one pointed sort of down the street, and you can see it's blinks a couple times, and it's very random. Zip tie worked fine on the stick. And when I had, when I need to go at a 90-degree angle, when I used two zip ties, I'll show you that in a minute. So there's one. Another one is down here in the bushes. And another one kind of faces people when they come up the sidewalk right there. And then there's one over here in the bushes. That's kind of easy to see. I may hide it a little better later. We'll just see how that works. And then I wanted one all the way across the driveway over here on its own. And again, this may be a bit visible, but I kind of think not. And this is the one where I used two crosses in order to get it to attach to the branch. I think that works just fine. So once you get your eyes done and the programming of the Arduino done, obviously you're going to need some way to connect the two. Originally I had this plan to use Christmas tree lights because I knew that they would be inexpensive and they were made for outdoor use. And when I tried to use them, though, it was horrible. They're all raveled together and you have to cut off the lights, and they weren't long enough. It just wasn't a good way to go. So I'll leave a link in the description to the actual wire that I used, but here is a view of it. And I connectorized mine with little U connectors to go on the terminal. But you wouldn't have to. You could do as I did before, as I did with these, where you just strip off enough and wrap it around and then screw it in. And then each one goes out to one of the eyes, and it's pretty thick stuff. It looks pretty good. It's made for outdoor use. It's 16 gauge, but the currents that are carried in this thing are so low that honestly you could use a much smaller gauge. I just had trouble finding anything that worked that was outdoor and was in the right price range and that sort of thing. So other than that, you can use pretty much what you want to get it to where you're going, and that's really all you need. And there you have it. I am not a fan of clickbait, so I hope that I have accurately portrayed this as something that a non-technical mom or dad could do. Obviously, I did a little bit different than what I'm saying could be done as, because I have more resources, but I think I gave enough explanation as to how somebody might be able to overcome some of those hurdles. Let me know in the comments if I'm right. Don't let me know if I'm wrong. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. The video at the end is a little blurry, and I apologize for that, but the camera just doesn't like to focus at nighttime. But I think you get the idea. It's a very subtle effect spread throughout the bushes that really makes Halloween fun. So thanks for watching, and happy Halloween.